Welcome to Infectious Disease Lesson 4.1, Why We Feel Sick, How Pathogens Cause Direct and Indirect Damage. The goals of this lesson are to discuss how pathogens cause symptoms by activating immune responses and by causing direct and indirect damage to host cells, and to relate the location and rate of replication to patterns of symptoms. At the end of the lesson, the students should be able to identify symptoms caused by an immune response to infection, distinguish between direct and indirect host damage, and give an example of how extracellular and intracellular bacteria cause host damage and symptoms. We will achieve these goals with a small group brainstorming about symptoms caused by two diseases, and by discussing the differences between intracellular and extracellular pathogens, as well as between fast and slow-growing ones. To prepare for this lesson, you'll need to review the following key scientific concepts. Symptoms are caused by the immune response and by damage to host cells and tissues. Common symptoms are often caused by the immune response. There are two main ways pathogens cause symptoms, through direct and indirect damage, and symptoms are related to where and how fast pathogens grow. You can review this scientific content in the background reading provided for you in the teacher primer, the teacher manual, and the student workbook. The teacher primer provides in-depth knowledge about the scientific content presented in this lesson. The teacher manual, or lesson plan, provides a minute-by-minute explanation of the lesson structure, and the student workbook provides additional explanation for students. Note that there is also an annotated version available for teachers. Be sure to print the lesson worksheet, which is located in the Lesson 4.1 course materials. This lesson also requires watching two video clips about intracellular and extracellular replication. The video clips are embedded in the PowerPoint slide deck, and you'll want to confirm that they play properly on your computer before using them in class. The key points of the do now are that common symptoms are often caused by the immune response, and there are general symptoms and disease-specific symptoms. The do now begins by brainstorming the symptoms of the flu and strep throat. The students will see that many of the symptoms are general or common to lots of diseases. As we will see in the discussion, general symptoms result from the body's response to an infection, while disease-specific symptoms tend to relate to the pathogen's life cycle. The key points of the discussion are that pathogens cause symptoms by damaging host cells. This can be through direct or indirect damage. Another key point is that the location and rate of replication affects disease symptoms. We'll get there by providing many examples of symptoms from various types of pathogens. We begin the Socratic discussion with the question, how do pathogens cause these symptoms? This introduces the idea that there are two mechanisms that lead to symptoms. First, pathogens stimulate the immune system, causing inflammation, which includes swelling, pain, redness, and fever. The immune response also leads to symptoms like coughing, sneezing, diarrhea, and vomiting. Second, pathogens damage our cells, leading to a loss of function and symptoms. Next, we define direct and indirect damage. Students may find the definitions abstract, so it is important to compare and contrast direct and indirect damage and to offer some examples. Once you feel that the students have grasped the differences between direct and indirect damage, we will look at examples of symptoms from intracellular and extracellular bacteria, Staph aureus and chlamydia, respectively. We watch video clips to review intracellular and extracellular replication. Then we consider how the location of pathogen replication might impact symptoms. As microbes replicate extracellularly, they will likely attract attention from the immune system, leading to inflammation and killing of the microbe, as well as healthy bystander host cells. This leads to indirect damage. Extracellular pathogens may also release toxins and enzymes that cause direct damage to host cells in the area or indirect damage when they spread to distant sites from the infection. As microbes replicate intracellularly in host cells, they often lead to direct damage as they use the nutrients of the host cell. They may also lead to indirect damage if an immune cell recognizes the infection and kills the cell or kills healthy host cells in the process. Staph aureus is an example of an extracellular pathogen that can survive in many environments. This means that extracellular replication can take place in multiple locations in a host, which leads to a wide range of symptoms. Note that detailed information about Staph aureus can be found in the teacher manual. Chlamydia is an example of an intracellular pathogen that has a restricted host cell type that it survives in. This means that the location of intracellular infections and their symptoms are often predictable. Chlamydia grows in the epithelial cells of the mucous membranes of the eyes and genitals. Use this slide to walk the students through chlamydia's life cycle. It is important to review details of the life cycle prior to teaching the lesson. After walking through the life cycle, we can connect the location of replication to symptoms. Given that chlamydia is restricted to growing in select cells, the damage to those cells leads to disease-specific symptoms. As with Staph aureus, detailed information about chlamydia can be found in the teacher manual. Next, we look at symptoms caused by bacteria that replicate quickly or slowly. We will look at cholera as an example of a fast replicator, and tuberculosis, or TB, as an example of a slow replicator. Fast-growing bacteria like Vibrio cholera replicate quickly, and so they tend to cause acute illness. Acute illness can be caused by direct or indirect damage, and the immune system tends to respond vigorously because the bacteria are growing quickly. This in turn causes severe general and indirect symptoms. Unlike fast-growing bacteria, slow-growing bacteria, like TB, generally stay in one location for long periods of time and hide. So slow-growing bacteria generally cause chronic or even asymptomatic infections. TB is covered by a thick waxy coat, which makes it difficult for nutrients to diffuse into the bacteria, so its doubling time is much slower than normal bacteria. Because TB replicates slowly, it does not need to migrate to new host cells frequently, and instead it stays in a small number of host cells that become surrounded by immune cells that wall it in, forming a granuloma. The key point of the lesson's wrap-up is to compare and contrast the processes of host damage and symptoms of Staph aureus, chlamydia, cholera, and TB. We'll get there by having students reflect on the video clips and complete the summary table. The table helps to compare and contrast the key points of today's lesson. The key point of the lesson's homework is to introduce a number of bacterial toxins. We'll get there by completing the jigsaw reading for Lesson 4.2, which is located in the student workbook. One of the most common questions students ask is, can a pathogen cause direct and indirect damage? Yes, it's important to emphasize that pathogens often cause both types of damage. Another question students ask is, can the immune response lead to inflammation in the absence of an infection? Yes, damage to the host can cause sterile inflammation. For example, a broken arm leads to redness, swelling, heat, and even fever. Although vaccination does not cause an infection, it often triggers body aches and fever. In the next few lessons, we will see more examples of host microbe interactions and complex life cycles. Don't forget, if you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, to let us know. You can contact any of the CTSE team members, and we'll be happy to help you.